Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Before we begin today's webinar, Osteoporosis Canada acknowledges the land that our offices located in Toronto are on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. My name is Tracy Napoli, Director of Fund Development and Marcom at Osteoporosis Canada, and I will be the moderator for today's presentation, Nutrition in the Lifecycle. Thank you to Danone Canada, Oikos, and Silk in partnering with us on this webinar. This presentation will provide general information about nutrition, bone health, and osteoporosis. It is not intended as individualized health advice. If you have questions about nutrition, bone health, or osteoporosis, consult a physician or registered dietitian. Now, during the webinar, if you have a question, you can click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and enter it there. We will do our best to answer as many questions as we can during the webinar within the time available. Today's webinar, Nutrition in the Lifecycle, features registered dietitian Shelly Hagen. Shelly is a registered dietitian and currently works as an educator in the Women's Wellness Program at the Grey Nuns Community Hospital in Edmonton, Alberta, facilitating menopause and osteoporosis group education sessions and working one-on-one with patients to make well-informed health decisions concerning menopause and osteoporosis management. Shelly completed her Bachelor of Science in Foods and Nutrition at the University of Saskatchewan and is credentialed as a NAMS certified menopause practitioner through the North American Menopause Society and is also a member of Osteoporosis Canada's Scientific Advisory Council. Please welcome Shelly.
Good afternoon. And thank you for that kind introduction, Tracy. And thank you to Osteoporosis Canada and Danone for inviting me to lead this webinar this afternoon. It's so important to talk about healthy bones across the lifespan and at every age. And I want to thank each and every one of you as well for taking time out of your busy day for wanting to learn more about healthy skeletons and good bone health as we get older. So what I have planned for this afternoon is we're going to just start off gently by sort of talking about the healthy skeleton, and then we're going to get into a discussion about peak bone mass and how important that is and the factors that contribute to peak bone mass. And then we're going to get specific and focus on the key nutrients that help attain peak bone mass and support bone health in general. So that's namely calcium, vitamin D, and protein. And then we'll close off by sort of looking at healthy dietary patterns or healthy plates, and then end off with questions. So that's how the afternoon will unfold. So our skeleton is truly amazing. Not only does it help us bend and twist and move and keeps us independent, but it has a very important job as well, and that's to protect or provide covering against our important internal organs like our brain and our heart and our digestive tract. So all of us, our skeleton is formed well before we are born. It supports us through all our lives, and it remains long after we die. Regardless of our age, our gender, our race, our nationality, or belief set, we all have a skeleton, but we often take this very important organ, this essential organ, for granted. And so we want to really take care of it. The most common health issue, the most common disease that has a negative impact on bones is osteoporosis. And that's a situation where the internal structure of the bones become more porous and the bone is much weaker. And that porous, weaker bone really is sets you up to have fractures. And fractures due to osteoporosis can prevent present anywhere in the body, but they mainly occur on the wrist, the shoulder, in the mid and lower back. And then, of course, we're very concerned about hip fractures. So osteoporosis is a very significant health issue for Canadians. Over 2.3 million Canadians are currently living with osteoporosis. And if we sort of look specifically at how many will break a bone due to osteoporosis, so if we all live to age 85, 1 in 3 women would break a bone due to osteoporosis and 1 in 5 men. So the chance of fracturing as we move throughout our lifespan is very real and quite significant. And 80% of all fractures that happen in individuals over age 50 are caused by osteoporosis. So often people say, well, I broke a bone because I fell this way and it was such a hard fall. But strong, healthy bones should be able to take everyday forces. And if you're breaking a bone from simple trips and slips and falls, that's a key sign that you may be losing bone and the bone isn't very good quality, which is the underlying component of osteoporosis. So we want our skeletons to age well. And now let's sort of talk about the steps that we can put in place to support the skeleton from birth until very advanced age. So first of all, it's important to realize that bone is living and changing tissue. You know, when we think of bone, we often think of the Halloween skeleton and then sort of that, you know, stiff, hard, white, graphic design of bone. But and it's true, the outside of bone is very hard and rigid like that, but the inside of bone is a powerhouse of activity, and there's lots of things happening that help at the beginning, help the skeletons grow, or as we get older, sort of a bit of balance. And then as we move into our 60s and 70s and beyond, we do start losing bone. That is part of the natural aging process. But bone is constantly being rebuilt and renewed. And in essence, we have a whole new skeleton every 10 years. So that means that wherever we are in the lifespan, we can jump in and make a difference to our to make our skeletons healthy. And if we think about what exactly that bone is made of, it is a mix of different things. So about 25 to 30% of the structural content of bone is protein and water, and the other 70% is minerals, calcium, magnesium, and a whole host of other minerals. So it's a mix of proteins and minerals that really make the bone strong. So the other thing to be aware of is bone mass does change throughout the life cycle. So when babies are born, they don't weigh much and their bones are relatively small and they're not very strong. But quickly, those little babies grow and turn into toddlers and then young children. And as they are growing, their bones are getting longer. So they are accumulating calcium into the skeleton. And then right around the age of 12 for girls and about 14 for boys is when we usually see a big increase in height. So that means that the bones are really getting longer, and then inside of the bones is also getting highly mineralized and strong as well. So puberty is the real signal of that. And then the bones continue to sort of get long and strong during adolescence, and then they reach their peak sort of right at the end of adolescence, around age 20. And you can see from this graph, the purple is looking at the peak bone mass for males, the blue is for females, that men do have bigger and stronger bones just by the fact that they are male. So they have a higher peak bone mass than do women. That's natural and that's expected. And then after about age 20, once we reach that peak bone mass, the bones are relatively stable. So old bone is broken down and replaced with new bone, but it's kind of in balance. So we don't really gain or lose bone in our 20s and 30s and 40s. But around their 50th birthday is when women often experience menopause, and that drop in estrogen signals fairly rapid bone loss, which goes on for about 3 or 5 years, and then it slows down. And women continue to lose bone after that time, about 0.5 to 1% per year, as do men. But women lose substantially more bone because of that drop around the last menstrual period, and because their peak was lower, just due to their gender. And so one of the most important things when we look at sort of how the bones change throughout the life cycle is we really want to focus in on the peak bone mass and what can we do to get that peak bone mass as high as possible. And that's really important, because if we think about sort of the time that we can prevent osteoporosis, it really is in those formative years when we want to have all the ingredients on board to get those bones as long and strong as possible and maximize that peak bone mass. After that, it's kind of reactive. We want to prevent the bone loss, but we're not really going to gain bone beyond our peak bone mass at any other point in our life. So how important is achieving the peak bone mass? Well, it's huge. So if you're following people out, the higher we get that peak bone mass, so a 10% increase in peak bone mass is expected to reduce the risk of fractures due to osteoporosis by about 50%. So that is hugely significant. And for women, even if there's things, if their menopause, which is the time of their last menstrual period, or their menopause is a little bit later than average. So typically women sort of end their periods around age 51, but if they continue to have periods till age 53 or 54, or even a bit longer, that is really advantageous from an osteoporosis or bone point of view in terms of delaying the onset. But unfortunately, we really don't have much control over when our periods end and things like that. The bottom line is peak bone mass is likely the single most important factor in the development of osteoporosis. So what can we do across the lifespan to optimize that peak bone mass? Well, there's been quite a variety of factors that have been shown to influence the peak bone mass. So key among them is nutrition. So a whole bunch of nutrients can help, and we'll be talking a bit more about that. There is also evidence to show that certain food patterns, so if individuals who eat diet that contain significant amounts of dairy foods, increased fiber intake, lots of fruits and vegetables, and limited soda pop and limited caffeinated beverages is also very helpful for achieving that peak bone mass and then maintaining it after that. Certainly, infant and childhood and adolescent nutrition has a big part to play. So if children are in environments where they get all the nutrients that they need, then they can maximize their peak bone mass. And that's key as well. So looking at those practices. Smoking and even secondhand smoke can negatively limit a peak bone mass, as can excess alcohol intake. So that isn't so much a concern for children and adolescents. Well, this secondhand smoke is a concern for children and adolescents, but the smoking and excess alcohol have more to do with adults and sort of leading to early bone loss. And then something that is also very important for influencing peak bone mass is increased physical activity. And so getting the body moving, stretching, bending as much as possible is really important for achieving that peak bone mass. So all these factors work together, and if we optimize them all, then we're going to work towards achieving that peak bone mass. And remember as well that the big peak bone mass is also hugely influenced by genetics. So 70% of the peak bone mass is genetically predetermined. So it's determined at the time that we're born. So that only leaves us with a 30% window to try to optimize that even more. And so the factors on your screen are that what can contribute to fully meeting our genetic potential and even moving above that to achieve the peak bone mass. So lots of different vitamins and minerals work together to protect the bone. Calcium and vitamin D, protein, fiber, vitamin K, vitamin A, magnesium, potassium, phosphorus, B vitamins, and lots of trace minerals like boron and copper and selenium. We're learning more about these things all the time. And we don't have sort of the luxury of a day to sort of go through all of these individually. So what I'm going to focus on this afternoon are the nutrients that have the greatest evidence behind them that support building up peak bone mass and then maintaining bone as we get older. And so that it is in looking at the calcium, vitamin D, and protein. So let's start off with calcium. And again, the vast majority of calcium in your body is stored in your bones and your teeth. But it's important to remember that calcium is found in every living cell in your body. And it does some really, really important jobs in those living cells, such as helping to regulate the way your heart beats. It helps with the way your muscles relax and contract. It helps maintain normal acid-base balance in the blood. So it does some critical functions. So to protect those really important functions, the body depends on you delivering enough calcium on a daily basis to meet those basic requirements. And if the body realizes that not enough calcium is coming in, then what it does is it sends a signal to the skeleton to release some calcium, because they know there's lots stored there, but we have to protect those important functions at the cellular level. So then if we release it from the skeleton, then that will serve to keep everything in balance. And yes, you do have a lot of calcium stored in your skeleton, and withdrawing from it once in a blue moon is probably not going to get you into trouble. But if you are consistently not meeting your calcium requirements, say in childhood and adolescence, then you're not going to accumulate a lot of calcium in the skeleton, and you're not going to reach your peak bone mass. If you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s and not meeting your daily requirements, then you're withdrawing from the calcium bank account. And if you're doing that on a regular basis over the course of months to years, those bones get very thin because the calcium's no longer in the skeleton to keep it nice and strong. It's been used for other purposes. So no matter what age, you really need to make sure that you are meeting your calcium requirements on a daily basis. There isn't a lot of grace here. The moment that you don't get enough calcium, then the body tries to fix it, and that's where the conundrum begins. So how much calcium is recommended? Well, the amounts vary depending on age group. So younger children, age 1 to 3, they don't have the same amount of bone structure. So their goal would be having about 700 milligrams of calcium a day. As children grow bigger, their bones get bigger and stronger, so their calcium requirements go up a little bit to 1,000 milligrams a day. And then just before the onset of that growth spurt that we talked about earlier, so around age 9, we recommend even more calcium. So from ages 9 to 18 in both males and females, we're recommending about 1,300 milligrams of calcium. So we need significantly more calcium on board so that as the bones grow and get stronger, we have the calcium on board to get embedded and help make those bones really strong. And then at the end of adolescence, when we've sort of maximized the bone growth, the calcium requirements drop back down a little bit. So down to 1,000 milligrams a day between ages 19 and 49. But then around age 50, they pop back up. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, as we get older, we do not absorb calcium as efficiently. So then we need to get a little bit more in the body to end up absorbing the same amount. and also that drop in the estrogen hormone. Estrogen helps absorb calcium. And so if you have less estrogen on board, then again, you need a little bit more calcium. So that's why the requirements sort of pop back up around age 50 and stay around 1200 milligrams all the rest of your life. So are we getting enough calcium? And if not, who is not getting enough calcium? And the survey results are quite hard to believe. So in Canadian nutrition surveys, they are suggesting about 80% of girls and 65% of boys between age 9 and 18 are not meeting their daily calcium requirements. And so that is going to have a very negative effect and prevent them from achieving that peak bone mass. 70% of women ages 19 to 50 do not meet their daily calcium requirements. That's huge. And then if we look at older adults, 90% of women over age 50 do not meet their calcium requirements, and 90% of men over 70 are not meeting their daily calcium requirements. So this does not bode well for bone health. So let's talk about where you get calcium. So the obvious first choice is food, and we'll sort of look at the calcium content of various food sources in a few minutes. So that's the number one place to get calcium where possible. It's also nice to see that the marketplace, the grocery store, is sort of changing, and food manufacturers are increasingly introducing a variety of foods onto the grocery stores that sort of plant-based beverages such as oat or derived from oat or cashew or soy or rice, and they add calcium and vitamin to it. So those foods don't naturally contain a lot of calcium and vitamin D, but the manufacturers fortify it. And then that can be a great way to get the calcium and vitamin D into your bodies, especially if you don't like dairy foods. So the plant-based beverages, there's a huge proliferation of those. And then also certain brands of orange juice are fortified with calcium and vitamin D. So that can be another way of getting calcium into your diet. And then the third source of calcium is supplements. That's definitely not the preferred supplement. Again, with the supplements, they usually only contain calcium, and whereas food contains a mix of ingredients that can support bone health. So where possible, we always want you to try to get meet your calcium requirements with food if possible, and that's across all age groups. Food first is best. So I mentioned about food, and so let's sort of look at the calcium content of various foods. So milk, all types of milk, whether it's skim or 2% or cow's milk or goat's milk, 1 cup gives you about 300 milligrams of calcium, as does the fortified plant-based soy, rice, almond, oat, cashew beverages. They give you just over 300 milligrams of calcium. Cheese, so a 50-gram portion of cheese, or sort of the portion, the size, if you were cutting cheese off the block and it was the size of 2 9-volt batteries, that gives you a generous amount of calcium. Skim milk powder, when it's reconstituted, is a good calcium source. Yogurt has a fair amount of calcium, as does tofu if it is made with calcium, or kefir, which is a fermented milk beverage that is quite popular, is a good source of calcium. And then as are sort of meal replacement nutrition supplement drinks that are sometimes prescribed in the hospital for individuals that don't eat enough food, they can be a way of sort of getting a little bit of extra calcium and protein in as well. And Osteoporosis Canada has lots of great calcium-rich recipes on their website that you can check out. So those are the best sources of calcium. You tend to get a lot of calcium for the amount that you have to eat, and calorie for calorie, quite dense in calcium. You certainly can get calcium in other foods, and especially there's other sources of calcium besides milk and the non-dairy beverages. And these are wonderfully nutritious foods, but if you are totally relying on them for calcium, you just have to be conscious that you do need fairly high amounts of these foods to get you up to that, 1,000 or 1,200 milligrams, or teenagers up to that 1,300 milligrams of calcium a day if you are needing that. So for example, if you have 3/4 of a cup of salmon with the bones, then that would sort of give you close to 300 milligrams of calcium, as would 3 cups of cooked kale, or 4.5 cups of broccoli, 1.5 cups of bok choy, or 3/4 of a cup of almonds. So all these foods are wonderful, but you do need a fair amount of them if you are totally relying on them to meet your calcium requirements. So you just need to plan it out and sort of be aware of that. So what else can help you sort of figure out how much is in the calcium, or how much calcium is in the foods that you are eating on a regular basis? Well, your nutrition facts table has a wealth of information on it. So take a look at the serving size, because that will let you know that they're quantifying the nutrition information for that particular serving size. So you need to think, if I'm having yogurt, do I eat 3/4 of a cup at a time? But if you eat less or more, then you have to adjust the nutrition facts to meet that. So here, if we do have 3/4 of a cup of yogurt, it would give you about 175 milligrams of calcium, as you can see on the label, and about 16 grams of protein. So then you can sort of loosely keep track of how much calcium you're getting from your diet throughout the day and do a little self-check. So the other tool that you can use is you can go to the Osteoporosis Canada website, and they have an interactive calcium calculator. And what you do is you just sort of plug in the foods that you're eating throughout the day and try as best as possible to estimate your portion size. And then once you've entered all the foods and the portion size, you push calculate, and the tool will give you a very reliable estimate of how much calcium you're getting from your food, getting from your diet every day. And then you can compare that to the recommended amounts for your age group and see if you're on track. And if the amount of calcium you get from your diet seems to match what is recommended, you're on track, you're good to go. So that's excellent. So a few words about calcium absorption. So I alluded to this earlier, but compared to other foods in the typical diet, milk products do provide more calcium, protein, potassium, magnesium, zinc, and phosphorus per calorie than do any other foods. So that's why they're the often sort of go-to food to meet our basic calcium requirements. Calcium from milk products, kale, broccoli, and bok choy is very easily absorbed. We're very efficient absorbing it, so that's a good bonus. But calcium found in some plant-based foods, especially things like spinach, rhubarb, and Swiss chard, is less well absorbed, and almost there's sort of ingredients in the food that sort of tie up the calcium and make it unavailable. So they're very nutritious foods. We don't want you to stop eating them, but because the calcium is not very available, we just don't tend to count those as sort of major calcium sources. So don't stop eating them, but we just don't count them into your daily calcium total. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention about I talked about sort of this proliferation of calcium, fortified foods on the market. And so in particular, the fortified soy beverages and the fortified fruit juices, or the orange juice, the calcium that is added to those products does seem to settle to the bottom of the container. So it's really important to vigorously shake those containers before you pour them into your glass, so that you're getting that calcium redistributed and then into your glass, and not letting it all settle to the bottom of the container and then rinsing that before you throw it into the beverage recycler. So shaking those things vigorously is very important, so that you get the full calcium that is added to it. So let's look more specifically then about milk consumption. And, you know, if it is one of the best sources of calcium, are we getting enough of it? So first, what does the research show? And the research indicates that drinking milk and having more of it is a significant predictor of height. And we do see greater increases in bone mineral density in children and adolescents who drink milk and have it more often. Dairy products have been shown to increase bone density in healthy postmenopausal women. And in older adults, higher milk consumption is associated with a lower risk of hip fracture. And that may be even more pronounced if they tend to emphasize fermented dairy products, yogurt, or cheese. So there is research now looking at, are there specific dairy foods that may be more advantaged for the bone than milk? And so that's going to be interesting to see. And then the last point is that the calcium that's in milk is highly absorbed, and we've always talked about that. So again, here's our bit of our conundrum. So we know that there's good evidence about milk, and it is very important throughout the lifespan to meet our calcium requirements, but we are consuming less. So most Canadians are consuming less than 1 cup of milk a day, less than 1 ounce of cheese, and less than 2 tablespoons of yogurt each day. And here you can look at the different age groups and sort of see the decrease in milk product intakes from 2004 to 2015. So our calcium requirements have not changed during this time, but one of the main food sources that helps us meet our calcium requirements is on the decline. And I find it rather curious, at the same time that the calcium intake from dairy products is on the decline, soft drink intake has doubled between the 1980s to 2000s. And so I think what we're doing is we're not drinking as much milk or eating as much dairy foods, and we've kind of replaced that with sugary sweetened drinks, which really don't offer any nutrition outside sugar and calories. So we have to be careful when we're making changes in one part of the diet that we are replacing that with healthy choices to augment the loss of those nutrients and not just replacing the calories. So a few tips that can help boost your calcium. So skim milk powder is a great resource if you have a bag of it in your cupboard, and you want to sort of add a little bit of extra calcium if you're mixing up cookies or muffins, or you're making a smoothie, or you're making a casserole. You can just throw in a bit of skim milk powder, and that will add some extra calcium to that the final product, and no one will know that it's there except for you. And so that's a sneaky little way, especially for people who don't like to drink milk. If you're making cream sauces, you could switch to using evaporated milk. It'll make a nice, rich, silky sauce, like for, a white sauce for pasta. And evaporated milk, because the water is removed, it has double the calcium as a glass of regular milk. So that can be a great way of sneaking in more calcium. You're eating the same amount of food, but you're just adding extra calcium to it. You can buy some milk products now that are fortified with extra calcium. You can use the calcium fortified plant beverages in cooking, baking, or drinking to get some extra calcium in there. And it's nice that steamed milk, you can steam milk, or you can steam the plant-based beverages and add your favorite flavorings like almond or hazelnut to flavor them up, and that might be a great way of sort of getting some extra calcium in. And it's great that nowadays lattes cafe au lait and chai are increasingly popular because those can be made with milk or the plant-based beverages. And again, more calcium when you drink those things. Smoothies are hugely popular, and they're usually have some yogurt in them or sometimes milk, or you could add even the extra skim milk, or again, you could be using your plant-based beverages as the base. And that's a great way of meeting your calcium requirements. And then usually you're getting lots of fruits and vegetables in there as well. And then just getting into the habit of using legumes wherever possible. You know, if you're having salads, putting on some garbanzo beans or red kidney beans on top of it, or in part of your chili or soups or casseroles, are other good ways of adding in the calcium. It all helps. So when might you need a little bit of help? Well, it can be extremely hard to meet your calcium requirements if you have a milk allergy, because that means you have to avoid the protein in milk completely. And so you have to completely eliminate that food group. So it can be difficult to meet your calcium requirements there. Individuals with lactose intolerance sometimes have trouble meeting their calcium requirements. But often people with lactose intolerance can still have yogurt and hard cheeses. They just have to avoid fluid milk. People that are vegans and avoid all animal products, with careful planning, they can certainly meet their calcium requirements, but it can take a little bit of work. And then people that just you know, skip meals or have poor eating habits, it really means that you can be at risk for low calcium vitamin D or protein. And that's when it might be really helpful to check in with the registered dietitian to make sure that you are getting these important nutrients, especially in childhood, to build the peak bone mass, and later on to maintain that bone mass as we get older. So the other point I wanted to make is that with calcium, more is not necessarily better. So your goal is to have enough calcium to meet your daily requirements. So 1,300 milligrams for adolescents, 1,200 milligrams a day for older adolescents. If you look at your diet and it's sort of getting you around those numbers, then that is fantastic. You don't need to superload and think, oh, you know, I need 1,300 milligrams a day, but I'm going to go for 2,000. Calcium is what we call a threshold nutrient. You get bang for your buck if you supplement up to what is recommended. Beyond that, you really don't get any additional benefits. So your goal is to try to get to that recommended amount. There's no benefit to exceeding it. And so what I always encourage you to do is always sort of get a sense of how much calcium you're getting from your diet or in your children's diet. And then the next thing we have to consider is, are you currently using any calcium supplements? And if so, how much? And if we are using the supplements correctly, then your dietary calcium plus any supplements should equal the recommended amounts. So again, for adults, 1,200 milligrams a day, considering all sources. So there's no benefit in super loading and, you know, getting 900 milligrams in your day in your diet and taking another 1,000 milligrams in your supplement for a grand total of 1,900 milligrams. You're not getting any extra benefit from the supplement at that point in time. And keep in mind that not all supplements are created equal. You do really want to read the label of your calcium supplements closely. And what you want to look for is on the fine print on the side, where it tells you how much elemental or usable calcium is in that product per tablet, or, you know, per liquid, whatever form that you're taking it in. And you need to understand how many milligrams of elemental calcium are being delivered to you, because that will help you know the right dose to use when you combine it with your diet. So we always start by getting an assessment of your diet and then look at the elemental calcium in your supplement, and together that should total your recommended amount. And as a caveat, we always recommend to try to meet your calcium requirements from food wherever possible. So let's move on and talk a little bit about vitamin D. And again, you'll see that your vitamin D requirements do vary depending on your age group. So you can find your age group. Younger people need a little bit less vitamin D. As we get older, we are recommending higher amounts. And I'm using the guidelines from Osteoporosis Canada, which are a little bit higher than Health Canada, but we feel that there is enough evidence in terms of bone health to recommend the higher amounts as we get older. So why is the vitamin D so critical to bone health? Well, vitamin D does lots of important things in our bodies, but it really is the key that opens up your cells to take in the calcium. So it's really important for helping you maximize the absorption of the calcium. And so it's essential to have adequate vitamin D on board from a bone point of view because of how important it is for the calcium absorption. So where do you get vitamin D? Well, most people know it is the sunshine vitamin. So when the skin is exposed to ultraviolet light, especially in the summertime, it sets off a process that activates vitamin D in your body. But we live in a country fairly far north, and the sun only activates the vitamin D synthesis for 6 months of the year. So starting the end of October through the end of March, even if it's a beautiful sunny wintry day, you're not going to make the vitamin D in our skin. And so often that's why we get into trouble with vitamin D. And if we rely exclusively on the sun to meet our requirements, it's just 6 months of the year we don't do it. And then in the summer, we wear sunscreen because we want to lower our risk for skin cancer, but that can block the vitamin D synthesis. And so it becomes really difficult to rely exclusively on the sun to meet your vitamin D requirements. Vitamin D is present in some foods, but it is quite a short list. So vitamin D is added to all fluid milk in Canada, and the non-dairy beverages are fortified with vitamin D, similar to cow's milk. But one glass only gives you 100 international units per day. And so it takes a fair amount of milk to meet your minimum requirements. Fish, especially the cold water fish, is a good source of vitamin D. So if you are eating fish consistently twice a week, that gives you a jump start on vitamin D. And then there are teeny tiny amounts added to margarine and found naturally in eggs, but we can't really rely on them exclusively to meet our vitamin D requirements. So then, knowing that it's difficult to rely on the sun to meet our vitamin D needs, and the list of foods is pretty short, that's why we've moved to the recommendation that all adults over the age of 50 need to take a vitamin D supplement. And there are different amounts of vitamin D that are found in supplements, so you have to read your labels carefully. And typically we recommend to use vitamin D3. That's a slightly more potent form of the vitamin, the D vitamin. So read your labels carefully for that. So what about protein? So protein, as I said, is a big ingredient or constituent of bone. So it makes sense then that we need adequate protein on board to build and repair strong bones. And indeed we do. And so the current recommendation, what we call the recommended dietary allowance, is the amount of protein that you need sort of depends on how much you weigh, your kilograms of body weight. And the calculation is usually 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. So for a woman, if you weigh between 60 and 80 kilograms, you need about 48 to 64 grams of protein a day. And so children, which typically weigh a lot less, would need significantly lower amounts of protein a day to meet their basic requirements. So where do we get protein? Well, obviously we get it from meats, all kinds of meats, fish, chicken, milk, eggs, cheese, yogurt, dried or canned peas, beans, lentils, collectively known as legumes. Nuts and seeds and nut butters contain protein, and as do soy products, tofu, soy drinks. And lots of new meat alternatives on the market that are usually made from pea protein or brown rice. And we do get very small amounts of proteins in whole grains and fruits and vegetables. But the main source of protein is from animal-based products. And this is a list that is sort of looking at the specific protein content of various foods. So again, if you sort of figure out how many grams of protein a day that you're needing, then you can do a little bit of a self-check if you sort of keep track of the foods you eat and their protein content, and make sure at the end of the day it is adding up to the required amounts. So 2.5 ounces of any type of cooked meat, sort of the size of meat, a deck of playing cards would give you about 21 grams of protein. If you have some tofu, 3/4 cup would give you about 12 grams. An egg is about 6 grams. That 50 grams of cheese that we talked about earlier, that was giving you the 300 milligrams of calcium, gives you about 12 grams of protein. Your fortified soy drink gives you about 7 to 8 grams of protein. Cow's milk gives you about 9 grams. Yogurt is 7 grams. Some brands are much higher and can be higher than that. The Greek style yogurt tends to have more protein. So there's about 14 grams of protein per serving there. So you can, look at your labels, and that can help you ensure that you're meeting your protein requirements either for your children or for yourself as you get older. And as I mentioned, your whole grains and vegetables contain protein as well, but much smaller quantities. So the good news is that most Canadians either meet or are exceeding their protein recommendations. The exceptions to that is a small percentage of women are a little bit low in protein, and then individuals over age 70, 4% of men and about 10% of women are shown to be deficient in protein. And so we are sort of doing okay in meeting our protein requirements. And so that's reassuring news. So just a few tips for making healthy protein choices. Try to include a protein-rich food at every meal. 1/4 of your plate should come from protein sources. Try to eat a variety of protein-rich foods, so not just the same ones over and over. And try to choose a balance of animal and plant-based protein foods wherever possible. So just quickly, as I'm winding down here, there are a couple of factors that, you're working hard to optimize the calcium, the vitamin D, and the protein. There are a few factors that sort of work against you. So you want to minimize their impact because they can increase the loss of calcium in the urine. So one is sodium. High sodium intakes cause you to lose calcium in the urine. So you really want to try to eat fresh, minimally processed foods to not have this effect take place. And the main sources of food is the more the food is processed, up goes the sodium content, and that's where the majority of the sodium sneaks into our diet. So if you tend to eat foods as close to their natural form as possible, minimally processed, then you won't have to worry too much about this. Caffeine, I'm always asked about caffeine. I think people sort of overestimate its effect. If you're having, 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day, enjoy that. You do lose a little bit of calcium in the urine, but the requirements are set to compensate for that. The concern is if you're having, 4, 6, or 10 cups a day, because people who take in lots of caffeine-rich drinks, they're usually not taking in milk. They choose the caffeine instead of dairy, and then they don't have a lot of calcium coming in, and there might be high amounts going out because of the excess caffeine intake. So just got to keep that in balance. We also know that the more fruits and vegetables you take, the more fruits and vegetables that you fill your plate with, that's very beneficial in terms of bone health and may offset some of the urine, the calcium loss that we typically see in urine. So fruits and vegetables is very important for bone health across all the ages. So we want to look at Canada's food guide that suggests to fill half our plate with fruits and vegetables, a quarter of our plate with whole grains, and a quarter of your plate with the protein-rich foods. The one thing, though, that Health Canada, that the Canada's food guide doesn't put enough emphasis on is the importance of getting the calcium, whether that be from dairy or the plant-based beverages that are out there. It's really important, as you can see, to meet your bone health needs across the lifespan. So bone is a living tissue that needs many nutrients, and our everyday choices impact our bone health. And so it's sort of depending where we are, if we're for pregnant women, our goal then is to make sure that the mom has a very healthy diet, because if so, then those babies are born with greater bone density, so they get a better start when they're born. And also with children and adolescents, it's so important to get adequate calcium and vitamin D and the other bone building components so that they can achieve their genetic potential. And for adults, adequate nutrition helps prevent early bone loss and helps maintain a healthy skeleton. And for seniors, what we want to do is identify the seniors at greatest risk of early bone loss and who may be at risk for osteoporosis, and trying to be on top of that wherever possible. So to wrap up, sort of the components to help build or to achieve peak bone mass in childhood to adolescence is to have a healthy diet with lots of calcium, avoid protein malnutrition and undernutrition, have an adequate supply of vitamin D, lots of fruits and vegetables, be physically active on a regular basis, and avoid the effects of secondhand smoking. And it's a similar message for adulthood: healthy diet with lots of calcium and protein, healthy weight. I didn't talk too much about that, but osteoporosis is generally a disease of thinness. So we want to have healthy body weights, adequate vitamin D, limit caffeine and sodium, eat more fruits and vegetables, be physically active, avoid smoking and secondhand smoking, and avoid heavy drinking. That can have a negative impact on bone health as well. So that is sort of bringing me to the end of my session. If you still have questions, here's some helpful websites that you can continue your search for information. And I'm going to turn it back to Tracy to moderate the question and discussion session.
Thank you so much, Shelly. That so much good information, and I just popped my camera on, and we got so many wonderful questions. So I do have a couple, and I know we're just adjusting our cameras here. So one of the first questions I have is it possible to build bone density with nutrition, or is it simply about preventing bone loss?
So up until the time we reach that peak bone mass, we can build. That's our window of opportunity. So that's why they often say that osteoporosis is a childhood illness that presents down the road in adolescence. So yes, up until age 20, we can build. Beyond that, we're not really building. When we reach that peak, that's it. We reach that peak. But we can maintain and keep the bone as close to that peak for as long as possible. And especially before, like as we get into our 60s and 70s, when we get that natural bone loss of 0.5% to 1% per year, if healthy nutrition can help mediate that a little bit. But we're not gaining, but we're just not going to lose as rapidly.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to pull one from our Q&A. Someone has said that they've read that the body can only absorb a certain amount of calcium at a time. And this person is saying if they have a glass of milk and a serving of cheddar cheese at the same meal, would that put her over the amount her body can absorb?
Yeah, so excellent question. So we're not the best calcium absorbers to begin with, and that's why the requirements are set very high to sort of compensate for that in general. And so there are certain times when the body becomes more efficient at absorbing calcium. So when we're pregnant, for instance, we absorb it more efficiently, or so, you know, nature is very good at trying to balance that out. But if you if you like throw way too much calcium at the body, it doesn't absorb that very well. So again, it's sort of finding that sweet spot where you're going to get the maximum absorption and the most benefit. And so sort of if we're looking at a supplement giving you 500 milligrams of elemental calcium at a time or less is absorbed fairly efficiently. But if you take 2 calcium pills at a time, then you're sort of only getting the goodness of one if, you know, it is now over 1,000 milligrams a day. There isn't quite the same effect with food. So if you have a glass of milk with a piece of cheese, so maybe that's getting you around 5 to 600 milligrams a day. There's so many other little ingredients in those foods that help with calcium absorption in general and bone health in general. I don't think you really have to worry about it. The issue is more with the amount of calcium supplement you take at any one time.
That's great. And here's a short question. Does limiting soda include sparkling water?
So the sparkling water, it doesn't have the sugar, so you don't have the calories, but the difficulty with those types of beverages is they often displace other calcium-rich beverages like the dairy or the plant-based products. So I guess we just have to look at it from that source. If that's a treat that you have once or twice a week, enjoy it, no problem. But if that's your main beverage and there aren't other, you're not getting enough calcium, then maybe could we switch that out a little bit and sort of balance that?
Great. All right. We have a couple of more questions. Can you provide some simple tips for including protein for people with low appetites or perhaps picky eaters?
So that's a really good question, and that's often important, especially for toddlers and young children that don't like meat and things like that. So then you just have to get a bit creative, and so you have to look at sort of foods that they enjoy and try to sneak the protein in. So for instance, if they like bread, then putting a nut butter on it, spreading it with peanut butter or almond butter or something like that, or you know, having grated cheese on top of their favorite pasta or something, so that you're adding in the extra protein and they're not necessarily aware of it, can help. And that's true for older adults as well. If they have a really small appetite and aren't, you know, just find it really challenging to eat enough, then you just want to make sure that every bite that you put into your mouth is as calorically dense as possible. So, you know, if you are having, you know, some plant-based milk, maybe adding in a little bit of extra skim milk powder if you can tolerate the protein. Like if you're not allergic to the protein in milk, or you're not lactose intolerant, then you can add extra calcium. You're drinking the same amount, but you're getting more calories and more nutrient dense calories to help out.
Okay, great. And someone would like to get more information on what's the difference between foods fortified versus a supplement.
It's kind of semantics, right? So calcium fortified foods are where the manufacturer is adding calcium. It's sort of like a liquid calcium supplement going into the food. It's just a different delivery method. So it's in a food versus a tablet or, you know, a syrup or something that you buy. But it's sort of the same ingredients, but just delivered in a different way.
All right. So can you ever build up enough bone density where you feel like you're confident? So you're over 70, you feel like you've done it all. Is there ever a point where you're like, I'm good? And I think you've already said this, but I think it's important to reiterate.
Well, the difficulty is, and this is just, you know, aging isn't the greatest, right? We lose bone as we get older. And that's just a natural part of aging. But if we can build up that peak bone and then maintain it, we know that we're going to have some losses, but you're not going to get in trouble as fast. So if you've done everything up until age 70 to maximize the peak bone mass, and you're active and you're eating good choices, you're probably going to be okay. And that's where, you know, if you had a bone density that sort of helped capture measured your bone density, and you might get some really reassuring news, and then keep up with those good everyday practices that you are doing.
Okay, I actually know we're going to do one more question. This is a really good question, and we can squeeze it in. Some people who are managing other conditions, they need to be on a low cholesterol diet, they have diabetes, you know, et cetera. And so they're starting to worry and make choices that perhaps like they're cutting out a variety of foods. How can they, and maybe they need to get some help in planning their meals, but how can they ensure that they are still able to consume that wide variety of foods that we've been talking about?
And that's the dilemma, right? Because we get such mixed messages. Don't eat this because it helps with this, and eat more of this because it helps with that. And you're sitting there trying to juggle that. So, you know, very often people tell me that they're not including as much milk or dairy foods because they're worried about their cholesterol or their heart disease risk, right? And so, you know, to them, the heart seems more valuable than the bones. And so I'm going to, you know, follow that sort of advice. But there's been, you know, quite a bit sort of examination of this, and the research is seeming to suggest that individuals who have low-fat dairy products on a regular basis, that does not increase their risk for heart disease. So we have to sort of, you know, balance messages so that we're living well in general, and sort of not have competing messages. But very often, especially when it comes to nutrition, what we do in one area is often advantageous in another area, and we just have to sort of put those pieces together a little bit.
Okay, great. Shelly, thank you so much. Now, I know we have so many questions that have come in, but we have run out of time. I do want to let you know that we do take your questions back, and your questions help inform our future content. So please stay tuned. We have blogs and lots of other resources to share information. You can, as Shelly mentioned earlier, calculate your calcium on the website. We also have our podcasts. If you are not into streaming on, you know, a podcast provider like iTunes or Google Play, you can listen directly on our website. You just press play. We also have the OC blog. And of course, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be, along with our others, on the OC Replay webpage in about a day or so. And if you have registered, you will get a direct link into your inbox where you can watch this again. And everything is available at osteoporosis.ca. I want to thank Shelly Hagen for all of that information. It was fabulous, very informative, and clearly everyone is so engaged. We still have more questions coming in. And also, we want to thank our partners, Danone Canada, Silk, and Oikos, for helping us generate and, you know, put on content like this. It's great. Again, our website, osteoporosis.ca. If you subscribe to the right up here to our newsletter, you will get information directly to your inbox on any future webinars that we're doing. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. But we really want to thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.